Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first meeting of Development Services in 2018. I'm going to introduce the committee members, but just before I do that, I want to advise them that the good commissioner, Paul Ralph, has told me that, of course, you all know we have public meetings tonight, and there are scheduled public meetings for our next two development services, so they're being scheduled ahead of us. So I think you'll understand that we are going to have a very, very busy year. So, and I know we're all up for it. So, with that, I want to introduce the Vice Chair, Councillor Nestor Pidwerbecki, and next to him, good member Dan Carter, good member Bob Chapman, good member Doug Sanders, and our very good Mayor John Henry. Now, going to our visiting councillors, who we always appreciate, Councillor Rick Kerr, who attends every meeting, and Councillor Gail Bates, who attends every meeting, and we welcome them. I'm going to ask the Commissioner, Paul Ralph, to introduce staff that's present.
Thank you, Chair Aker. To my right is Laura Davis, our Council Committee Coordinator. We have Warren Monroe, our Director of Planning Services, Megan Harrington, the Senior Planner, Kyle Benham, our Director of Economic Development Services, Tim Ryan, a Planner in Planning Services, Rob Beddick, a Senior Planner in Planning Services, Laura Brown, a Planner A in Planning Services, and we have Jerry Shostowski, our Manager of Accessibility and Admin, and Jerry has two new staff that he wants to introduce from Development Services to the committee today. Thank you, Chair Aker.
Yep.
Lauren has worked in the city of Oshawa since 2010 in a number of different branches, including fire services and most recently with strategic business services in the community services department. Lauren brings with her experience in finance and budgeting, data management, bylaws and permits, administration, and customer service, and is a welcome addition to the development services team. Welcome, Lauren.
There's another one. Yeah.
It's also my pleasure to introduce Robert Wilkes, our GIS technologist in the Administration and Accessibility Services branch. Robert is a graduate from the Geomatics Specialist Program at Fleming College. Robert's past work experience includes positions as a geomatics specialist in the oil and gas industry in Port St. John, BC, senior cartographer with a cartographic map production company in Victoria, BC, and most recently as a GIS technologist with the town of Saugeen Shores in Port Elgin, Ontario. Today is Robert's first day at the city of Oshawa, and I welcome him as part of the Development Services team.
Here, here.
I met him earlier today, but this is the first time I saw his face because I was standing and I couldn't see. So
You're good. No. Thank you, Jerry. Now, just to complete, welcome Lauren and Robert, first of all. This is a terrific municipality to be a part of. Lauren has already been helpful to Councillor Carter and myself last week when we were up on the first floor, down on the first floor, and we were looking for some information which she provided for us. So we look forward to successful careers for both of you with our municipality. Thank you. So I will remind everyone, when you are speaking, make sure the mic is on, because this meeting is audio recorded and webcast. To the elected presence, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Under the closed meeting DS-18-04, Frank Allen requesting approval in principle for an Aviation Heritage Museum Center, and DS-18-12, 420 Wing, Royal Canadian Air Force Association requesting to renew lease at 1000 Stevenson Road North. I'm a member of the Tank Museum in Oshawa, which is on the same footprint as both of these requests, and also the Honorary Lieutenant Colonel of the Ontario Regiment, and it is the Ontario Regiment's museum that's on the same footprint as the South Field as these two requests. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? No. Thank you. We are complete there then. With no further items, I'm going to ask our Director of Economic Development, Kyle Benham, to come forward and give us an update on the Smart Cities Challenge, which we are participating in across Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon.
Yeah, okay, we're going to put the lights out.
So in the last federal budget, the federal government announced the Smart Cities Challenge, and it's modeled on a number of challenges that have happened down in the States as well in Europe, whereby they put out a prize for communities to identify where they can use digital technology with respect to improving sort of the quality of life of their residents. It is a competitive process. It's being run by Infrastructure Canada out of the federal government. While it was announced in the budget in the spring, the actual competition was announced in November of last year, with the objective of really having cities collaborate with their local partners to design innovative projects that actually use digital technology to address pressing local challenges. There are 5 prizes. They range from $5 million to $50 million. The 2 $10 million prizes, 2 $5 million prizes for smaller municipalities, and actually one is going to be dedicated to the Indigenous community somewhere in Canada. This is a Canada-wide competition. There will be 3 rounds, so the first one is kicked off now. It closes on April 24th of this year, and then the thinking is that sort of the next round will happen sort of either later this year or into 2019. So what is a smart city? So Infrastructure Canada has really defined this as that a smart city is one that uses digital technology to improve the livability and opportunities for its residents, and that smart cities have the potential to improve every aspect of community life, affecting how people feel safe and secure, earn a good living, move around their community, enjoy the clean environment, be empowered to be included in society, have an active and healthy lifestyle. Part of the challenge is they've left it wide open in terms of the type of project that the communities actually select, but they do have a fairly robust process that they really would like everybody to follow and are requiring as part of the guidelines. The first is they've been very clear, and we've attended a number of sort of webinars and briefings on this over the last month and a half, is it really looking to make sure that the community spends the time and effort to really identify sort of what its priority needs are based upon both research and community input. And then use that to help define sort of what possible projects are, and then ideally, not ideally, we have to then engage the community with respect to picking one project for implementation. So I think what they're looking for us to do is to identify the 5 or 6 possible projects, but then say this is the one we're going to focus on. The one that we need to focus on needs to show very clearly how digital technology will have that impact on the community that's going to be affected. They want us to then enlist sort of community-private partners to deliver the project as it goes forward into 2019. And then the final bit of the requirement is, tell us what you're going to do, tell us how you're going to do it. So the very sort of details of what a project would look like. In terms of what they're going to be looking at with respect to evaluating projects, they've set it up in a way that they expect about 250 applications across Canada to be submitted for this. What they'd like to do is to shortlist that down. The number that's been bandied around is 20. That probably hasn't been decided, in stone by any means. And the finalists will be given $250,000 to then take sort of their project idea and then go into a much more deeper dive in terms of developing sort of the project, how it's going to sort of really roll out, a lot more detail. When they evaluating the projects to get to the short list, there's really kind of 5 things that they're looking at. A, how does it really reflect that true need in the community? Are the benefits actually achievable using the technology? Are they meaningful and measurable? Will they actually have a demonstrable sort of impact on the community that's going to be affected? Very importantly, they want it to be scalable and transferable across the country. Remember, there's only going to be sort of 5 winners that come out of this, and they're going to be looking for projects that have some universality that they're going to be able to share elsewhere in the nation, and ideally encourage communities to go down that path. And then finally, we need to show that there's been strong engagement and collaboration. So those are kind of the 5 key evaluation criteria that they'll be using. Sort of our approach, we kicked off just before Christmas by reconvening our stakeholder group from the Smart 21 Challenge that we had done a number of years ago. And so this picks up most of the community institutions in terms of the academic community, the library, the senior center, a number of others, to really come back around that table to say, okay, well, how have things changed since the last time we did the Smart 21, and to solicit their support. And it's been very gratifying that, in fact, they've shown a lot of interest to date. Partially what we've also done is we want to produce a community needs summary report. In discussion with a number of the community stakeholders, it became clear that there are a number of reports that have been done in the last 5 years around various aspects of community need, and we didn't need to particularly do a new study. What we needed to do was to gather all of that information together and sort of under one cover, and then do some analysis in terms of what are those themes that are coming out of those various sort of reports that have been done. So that'll be kind of that research component that we've been looking at. We're also going to be going down to sort of the community engagement path. I'll have another slide on that in a moment. Using all of that feedback, we'll develop sort of 5 or 6 sort of project options, and then prioritize one. We'll pick our channel, and that's the one that will go down. And then the last part of the project will be then to take that and develop sort of more project specific sort of information, as well as the business plan around that. So I just want to kind of work through our work plan over the next couple of slides, just so you have a sense of how it's going to unfold. The December 18th, we held our kickoff meeting with our stakeholders and got them engaged. We also then sort of undertook that community needs assessment summary report that we're doing. We are doing that in partnership with the Durham Workforce Authority, that actually probably had one of the better handles on the amount of research that had been done over the last number of years. And we also then put out a media release saying, look, Oshawa's in the challenge, we're going to go for it. We've reconvened back on January 9th. After the holidays with our stakeholder committee, which continues to grow as we get bigger. We're inviting sort of new stakeholders to the table on a regular basis. And really wanted to do 2 things: have an early discussion about their impression of community needs, lay out the methodology that we're using in terms of that summary report, and then start to have a high-level discussion about what are some of the project-type ideas that are out there. Everybody wants to jump immediately to ideas without having that discussion around sort of what are the needs out there. So we had to let people speak a little bit. And then we've also been developing our community engagement tools and a survey that we'll be putting out to the community. And in fact, that will probably be launched live today. By the end of January, we are looking to have as much as that community input back to us. And we actually have an open house scheduled for February 1st. In this room actually in the evening, whereby community groups and interested citizens, businesses will be able to come and sort of share their ideas, learn a bit more about the challenge. We take all of that input that we've received through January, and then on February 6th, we're back to our stakeholder group to really look at sort of the research that's done, the community feedback, the survey results, and say, okay, what does that speak to us in terms of community need? And then from there, what does that then start to suggest in terms of project ideas going forward? We then spend the rest of February really looking at sort of those challenge statements that Industry Canada or Infrastructure Canada is looking at. And ideally, by the end of February, we will then have that put in place, because we have a telephone town hall that we've now scheduled for February 28th. To get feedback in terms of, is there one that the community prefers over the other projects that have been identified. March 6th, we start to actually then get into sort of, okay, now that we've got sort of our channel that we want to go down, what is the project actually going to look at? How is it going to sort of hold together? We basically use all of March for putting the project together. We will be consulting back internally here during that period of time to get feedback from councillors and as well as sort of senior staff. In April, we want to come back to the Development Services Committee on the meeting of April 16th to present essentially, here is sort of the path we've gone down and the project that we're going to be putting forward. We need to get council approval before April 24th. This may entail a special session of council to do that. The deadline for submission is April 24th. part of our community engagement plan, beyond the regular community stakeholder meetings, we are going to be using the Connect Oshawa engagement tool. There will be a community survey built into that tool as an idea forum so people can submit ideas and have some online discussion around that. And then a dynamic Q&A system. So we've already posted some canned Q&As as part of the Connect Oshawa tool. As other people ask us questions, I'll get posted and create a running sort of list of what we've heard and what we've answered. We do have an open house plan for February 1st, as I noted, the town hall forum for February 28th. There'll be an ongoing series of sort of media releases and ads around the community engagement, and then, of course, quite a lot of social media through Twitter and other sort of accounts. I think we're at a point where we will actually be launching the engagement tool this afternoon. The survey is ready. The Connect Oshawa website piece is ready to go. We just need to push the button on that, and we'll be out to the street with that. In conclusion, we really do see this as a strategic opportunity for advancing a number of Oshawa's objectives. I think what a number of other cities have learned through the challenges that they've been through is even if they only focus on one problem for the prize, if you will, the process that they've gone through in identifying sort of 5 or 6 other priority areas, a number of them have worked forward in those areas also through other mechanisms to make that happen. We believe that we're well positioned to succeed. We've got actually a very good history now of existing smart community initiatives that this community has undertaken over the last number of years, both within City Hall and amongst our partners that are out there. We've got a very strong group of stakeholders that are actually very engaged and more than happy to work with us. Finally, I think community engagement will be the key in terms of helping sort of differentiate our submission from a number of others from other communities. So we are looking for the community council to help spread the word, direct people to Connect Oshawa, to the survey, and to the open house at this point. Thank you.
We're going to put the lights back on. First of all, thank you for an excellent presentation. To the committee members, questions? Councillor Carter.
First of all, good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Thank you, and Kyle, well done. Just a couple questions. I know you're going to be successful, but what happens to all those great ideas and the concepts that you're working through? Will there be an opportunity to utilize those concepts and ideas if we are not one of the recipients of the major prizes?
Yeah. One of the learnings from the competitions in the states, and we've had a chance to listen to a number of people that were both successful and unsuccessful. And the interesting piece was that, you know, by going through the process, they ended up with a de facto smart community strategy. So it will pick up the major kind of pieces of what we should be looking at or could be looking at as a smart community. And then sort of each of those individual projects will lend itself to how do we operationalize that, how can we move forward on those sort of pieces. And, you know, and you get different partner groups and stakeholders that are interested in one area over the other. And so I really do think this will be a very foundational piece for us moving forward.
I agree, and I think that what it does also is that it invites people inside the tent that may not be inside the tent at this particular time to start a relationship with our departments and our staff, and I think that that's a wonderful opportunity for everybody. The next question I have is across the region of Durham, who else do you see that is submitting? Do you know?
So one of the strange pieces about the challenge is that they made it clear, first of all, between sort of the region and the local municipalities. And the way that Infrastructure Canada has scheduled it, or put it together, is that if the region applies for the challenge, then the local municipalities are precluded.
Okay.
And if we apply, they're precluded.
Okay.
So we've had correspondence at this point with the region, and they've bowed out for this round. So it's cleared the decks for the local communities to go forward. We've got a request into Pickering to tell us whether they're in or out, and we haven't heard yet. And I've not heard of anybody else in Durham.
So, but they're independent. Each submission is independent.
They would be independent.
It wouldn't be a Oshawa Pickering. It would be Oshawa.
And we've left it open If there's a project idea that comes forward that makes some sense with respect to partnerships between municipalities, I mean, that's eligible.
Right.
And we would be open to that. So, there's been some talk about a mobility project of some form. And if, in fact, that is kind of the winning challenge, then it would probably make sense to do it beyond sort of the Oshawa borders. But we're trying to let the process really kind of show what those project areas are and then the logical sort of partnerships that need to be brought together around those.
Talking about partnerships, how's the uptake been here locally about partners coming in to be a part of this? As our post-secondary education, are they participating as companies, those entrepreneurs that have brilliant ideas, are they participating or are they being invited into the process also?
They've all been invited in.
Yes.
And they're all participating.
Beautiful.
Right. So
Beautiful.
it is a very broad group. And, what we're trying to do on a regular basis is, again, expand the breadth of that stakeholder community. We're a bit weak right now in some of the anti-poverty groups.
Yes.
But we're working sort of with the Durham Workforce Authority and the region now to try to expand that. But I think we're going to have a very good representation of the city by the time we get to picking a project.
So just expand on the poverty aspect. What is the element that you're looking for that specific skill set or input?
I think there have been a number of groups that have been involved around some of the priority neighborhoods pieces and others. And right now we're relying more on the government agencies. I think there's some nonprofits out there that we also need to have a little bit stronger representation.
Beautiful. It's got to be exciting for your staff too at the same time.
Oh, well, I know what I'm doing for the next 4 months. I mean, there's no doubt about that. It's actually a very exciting project. I think I say it will create some very interesting opportunities for this community moving forward.
I have to agree with the chair. Well done.
Councillor Rick Kerr.
Thank you, Chair Aker, and through you to Kyle. Great presentation. Just reiterate that. Perhaps I missed it in the presentation, but I noticed the logo up there said Smart 21. Just me, but can you tell me what that means?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. The Intelligent Community Forum is a nonprofit organization out of New York that has been promoting communities to make better use of broadband infrastructure and to develop sort of applications around the use of that in their community. So they've been running a competition probably for the last decade plus whereby every year they ask communities to essentially fill out a form, nominate themselves as sort of a smart community. And then they've got a couple of groups. They take the worldwide submissions, narrow it down to the top 21. Out of that, they take the top 7, and then every year they pick a top smart community. And so we participated this, I believe, in, I want to say 2015 or 2016.
Okay.
And then we were nominated as a smart community at that point.
Thank you. My second question simply was, if they're going to narrow down the number of business plans to 20?
That's what we're hearing.
Would that be a reimbursing or whatever of $250,000 to each of those communities that submit a business plan that has made it that far?
That's what we've been told.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, on behalf of the committee, well done. We look forward to you reporting back to us and keeping us informed.
Thank you.
Thank you. To the good, we have delegations. We have Mr. Hugh Peacock, and there must be a motion.
Mr. Chairman, that the delegation of Hugh Peacock be heard.
To the committee, all in favor? Carried. Mr. Peacock, please come forward. Good. Either one, you decide. We make sure his mic is on, Laura. Welcome. You are no stranger.
Thank you, Mr. Once a year, I do get here.
Good.
And you may remember, Mr. Chairman, Mayor Henry, councillors, commissioner, and staff. I presented this picture in December of 16 and was very, very pleased with the response of the committee, which went to council. Today, I'm inviting you to look at a very short question on the reverse of the photograph that went into the Express on December 13th, using the words trees or trucks.
Okay.
There's the trees,
Yeah. Now, is this just your entire presentation, the one picture?
one picture.
Thank you. Okay. We'll leave it the way it is.
Not quite exact for the moment, but taken from a very popular viewing point at Oshawa Second Marsh. And given that the sun will rise as we go into this, further into this year, and the ice will go out, the visitors will return. What will they see if the Port Authority of Oshawa persists and, in effect, demands that you extend Harper Road to the banks of Farewell Creek? And you can't quite see the creek because Ducks Unlimited Canada has spent millions in maintaining values in the marsh. It sits just behind the darkening edge of the marsh on the opposite side. And that's where Farewell Creek drains and empties into Lake Ontario. And that is the watershed, it is the geographic, it is the visual boundary of Oshawa Second Marsh. Now let me say in a little bit of retrospect, and I know you've heard it before, but I'm going to try to frame it slightly differently. In June of 2008, many of you here attended the first meeting under the Ontario Planning Act, where FarmTech presented its proposal for the ethanol refinery and had two applications pending. An application to amend the zoning for that space and an application to amend the official plan. Now from that point, I want to invite you to think of the relationship that began between the Port Authority and FarmTech Energy at that point in time, probably a little bit sooner, because the cooperative was incorporated in late 2007. And it was greeted with enthusiasm, was it not? And Mr. Valcour, the chair, at some point must have said to Mr. The president of O'Connor, how are you getting along with those two applications in front of the city, the official plan amendment and the zoning change for this piece of land? Never happened. FarmTech then goes to the province of Ontario in September of 2008, and Friends of Second Marsh was very pressed to make a huge decision to undertake a legal defense. And we were very fortunate to obtain the services pro bono of Canadian Environmental Law Association in time for the very first submissions in answer to this first application by FarmTech. It was withdrawn. Did Mr. Valcour turn to Mr. O'Connor and say, what happened to that first application? FarmTech then proceeds to make a second application. And 700 pages of communication between FarmTech and the Ministry of the Environment apparently resulted in a second withdrawal. Did Mr. O'Connor turn to Mr. Valcour turn to Mr. O'Connor and say, what happened to that second application? By the way, Mr. O'Connor, does FarmTech intend to apply for a permit to take water under the Ontario Water Resources Act? Never happened. And the time goes by to the point where three members of the federal cabinet, the Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, and the Minister of Transport, Minister Baird, have appointed the Honourable David Crombie. They've rejected his recommendations. They then declare this to be Crown land. They go on in Parliament to enact an end to screening of this type of application. When was the lease signed? That was 2012 for the change to Section 67 of the Canada Environmental Assessment Act. The lease was signed in 2013. And we now know through the remarkable piece of investigative journalism what was going on inside. I'm just sending these propositions out to you that something like that surely happened when an agency of the Crown is confronted with a major development like this. Was there any due diligence at all leading to that lease? I invite you to conclude that it couldn't possibly have been. And if in a business basis you cannot rely on that kind of judgment, you don't have a future with the Oshawa Port Authority. I invite you to turn, and you may not have copies. What could that future be if you persuade Minister Garneau, the Minister of Transport, to meet with you? I take you back to the comments of your committee in January 2013 on the initial land use plan by the Port Authority. 30 sections, and Section 5 subdivides into a long list of comments on the, my words, not your committee's, the utter inadequacy of that initial plan by the Port Authority. Just a couple of references. Your writer, now retired, I believe, from the staff of the department, compared other port authorities, and not a vestige of any one of them was in the Port Authority's land use plan. Thunder Bay, Windsor, Toronto, I forget a couple of the others that were compared. No reference whatsoever to the development of a strategic containment system for what happened in the McAsphalt fire. 3 days of water pouring onto the land, firefighters in exposure constantly over those days, an accident indeed, but nonetheless, if anything could demonstrate the possibilities of loss of containment, it must have been that event. And the Port Authority had no reference to it in that land use plan. They had no reference to Second Marsh. Perhaps I can just touch on one more reference. The land use plan must be revised to identify and establish policies which will protect all environmentally and culturally sensitive areas in and around the port. And it goes into some detail. I didn't mention moments ago, FarmTech and the Port Authority proceeded despite a clear caution from the Ministry of Environment, Ontario. You cannot proceed without our approval. And nonetheless, the Port Authority granted that lease. It took a very detailed history, 2 pages, and what could I say about the moment at which the Port Authority finally said, oh, nothing's happened. Could I call it a hangnail of a breach of the lease? Does that make any sense, Mr. Chairman? Yes. Thank you. Please consider right away the only possibility to live with a working, compatible, and sensitive Port Authority is to turn to the Minister of Transport, the Honourable Mark Garneau. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peacock. Now, there may be some questions to the committee. Any questions of Mr. Peacock? If not, visiting councillors. Thank you, Mr. Peacock. We will be dealing with this item in the very near future, in a few minutes.
I heard the dates, I think, maybe.
Now, the first thing we have in front of us in our normal agenda is the correspondence from Mr. Peacock, Mayor Henry.
Thank you, Chair Aker. I have a motion.
Nice and loud, Mr. Mayor.
Good afternoon, Chair Aker. I have a motion.
Good.
And it's been distributed to all members of council, I believe. And it just simply reads that the Development Services Committee recommend to City Council that whereas in 2010 Council requested staff to contact the Oshawa Harbour Commission, now the Oshawa Port Authority, and the Federal Crown to investigate the City of Oshawa making an offer to purchase the Gifford Hill, which is adjacent to the city-owned provincially significant Second Marsh. And whereas in response to the City's inquiry, the Crown and the Oshawa Harbour Commission advised that Gifford lands were not for sale. And whereas the City of Oshawa has established a good working relationship with the Oshawa Port Authority, and whereas the City of Oshawa has a significant interest in the overall development of the Oshawa waterfront and the protection of the Second Marsh, and whereas the City may have an interest in acquiring federally crowned lands that may propose to be disposed of in the future, therefore be it resolved that correspondence dated December 18th, 2017 from Peacock DS 18-08 concerning the administration of the Oshawa Port Authority and the request to have the Gifford lands conveyed to the city be received for information. And 2, that Mayor Henry be authorized to send a letter to the Federal Crown, the Oshawa Port Authority, indicating that in the event the Federal Crown of or Oshawa Port Authority decides to dispose of any lands in the future in the Oshawa Harbor area, including the Gifford lands, the City of Oshawa will be given the first opportunity to consider acquiring any of these lands. And Chair, just to speak to this, by sending this letter to the federal government, it will raise our interests there, talking about the potential ownership of these lands, and that I think for us that would be a great first start. So I hope to get the support of committee and get those letters out almost immediately.
Thank you, good Mayor. Committee members, any comments on it? Visiting councillors? Mayor Henry.
And just a recorded vote, please.
Recorded vote requested. Thank you. Did the media get a copy of this? Did the delegation get a copy of this? Did Ms. Peacock, did you get a copy of this? Okay. Thank you. Okay. On the vote.
Mayor Henry.
Yes.
Councillor Aker.
Yes.
Councillor Pidwerbecki.
Yes.
Councillor Carter.
Yes.
Councillor Chapman.
Yes.
Councillor Sanders.
Yes.
That's 6 affirmative.
That is unanimous. Thank you, committee. Thank you very much. Very good. Very good. We haven't had people clap for us in a long time. Okay, well, thank you. Now, I believe we're at the point of going to the consent agenda, but we're not going to the consent agenda. We have to ask first, before we go to the consent agenda, is there any items to be pulled from the consent agenda? If not, I look to my good Vice Chair.
Mr. Chairman, if no items are pulled from the consent agenda, that all items listed under the heading of Public Consent Agenda for the January 15, 2018 Development Services Committee meeting be adopted as recommended.
Any comment from committee? If not, all in favor. Carried unanimously. To the gentleman right in front of us there, that is the recommendation on 161 Athol Street GP Limited. It will go to council in 2 weeks' time. Okay. Does he have a copy of the report or anything like that? Okay. Thank you. You're welcome, sir. Okay, so we are now. Let's just take a little look at things here. We're moving along well, but mustn't trip here. Okay, now we've done the consent agenda. Any items to be introduced by councillors? None? Okay. So we are at the closed portion of the meeting. There are about 6 items in it, but 2 of them Mr. Councillor Chapman has a conflict on. So, Councillor Chapman, do you have any thoughts on how we should proceed with your 2?
I'd like to have them separate. If somebody can pull them for a separate vote, that'd be good. Thanks.
I'll pull those 2,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. So they would be DS 18-04 and DS 18-12.
Frank Allen? Oh, yeah, Frank Allen, we dealt, because he didn't appear, we tabled his item. Yeah,
you haven't done that part yet.
So
we haven't done anything?
make a motion.
Good.
Sorry.
Yep.
So I'll make a motion on DS 1804 to table.
Thank you.
Mr. Frank Allen.
That-
And do you need a referral?
Just let us catch up to you.
Sorry.
We're going to do one at a time. So we believe that Mr. Allen had a medical situation and couldn't attend today. So a motion to table.
Record.
Okay. On the tabling motion. Thank you.
Mayor Henry.
Tabling, yes.
Councillor Aker.
Yes.
Councillor Pidwerbecki.
Yes.
Councillor Carter.
Yes.
Councillor Chapman.
Con-
Oh, I'm sorry. And Councillor Sanders.
Yes.
That's 5 affirmative.
On the 420 wing, a motion
So-
to refer to staff.
So DS 18-12 will make a referral to refer this to staff
For a report.
for a report. Yes, sir?
Recorded vote, please.
Yep.
Mayor Henry.
Yes.
Councillor Aker.
Yes.
Councillor Pidwerbecki.
Yes.
Councillor Carter?
Yes.
Councillor Chapman has a declaration. Councillor Sanders?
Yes.
That's 5 affirmative.
Good. Thank you. Carried. Now, we still have in camera.
That's right.
How many items? 4 items. So, I'd like a question to the committee. Any items of those 4 to be pulled? To the committee. Any of those 4 items to be pulled? None. Thank you. You must have a consent motion for the in camera.
Mr. Chairman, if no items are pulled from the consent agenda, then all items listed under the heading of closed consent agenda for the January 15, 2018 Development Services Committee meeting be adopted as recommended.
To the committee. All in favor? Carried unanimously. This is going very well. This is going very well, and I'm getting behind, but that's fine. Okay. I think we're at a motion to recess. Councillor Chapman has moved to recess. All in favor? Carried. We shall see everyone tonight at 6:30 upstairs in the council chambers.